Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome to another Pride and Grit Spouse Spotlight. I am going to be joined today by Claire Wood, who is one of two founders of MilSpo Gurus. So we're going to talk a little bit about what she is doing with Kellie Artis over at MilSpo Guru and how that might be something that would be beneficial for you as well. So let's bring Claire in and talk a little bit. Oops, sorry. There you are. Talk a little bit about Claire. So welcome, Claire. Welcome to Pride and Grit and to our Spouse Spotlights. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. I know I told Claire before we got on that I feel like I know her because I've been, watching sort of their path. And so I feel like after listening to your podcast and everything else, I'm like, oh, it's Claire. Like, I know Claire. Like, I don't know Claire.
No, but we'll get to know each other today,
Yeah, no,
hopefully.
this is perfect. So, for those who also don't know Claire, give us kind of a highlight reel on Claire and kind of your military spouse journey, if you would.
Sure. Well, I'm 43 years old, and we actually have not been in the military that long, especially when we're comparing ourselves to many of our peers. My husband actually did a few years as a teacher and then a pastor and got in at age 34 to become a chaplain.
Mm,
So I say we haven't been in long. We're almost at 9 years, but yeah, so we've had a few duty stations. We've been at Fort Bliss, Fort Gordon, Fort Jackson. We're at Fort Polk right now. And it's been quite an adventure. We have three kids, ages 16, 14, and 12. And man, I mean, there's been so many parts of this that we have loved and that have really strengthened us as a family. But as you know, there are a lot of hard parts too.
for
So
sure.
you have to
So,
take the bad with the good.
yeah, no, for sure. So you're leading me well into my kind of my typical question, which is, in your 9 years and based on what you've seen, particularly from I think a chaplain spouse perspective, maybe a little bit different. What would you say for yourself and for those around you is kind of the big um, blessing, if you will, of the life, and then also the thing that tends to be the hardest for people.
Well, I'm going to start with the hardest, if that's okay, and then I'll lead into the good part. The hard part for me, I think, was because we got in so late in life. I had spent the first 34 years of my entire existence
Mm,
within just a few zip
yeah,
codes of each other, all of our extended family. So in my mind, like that was normal. It was
right.
normal to have grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and second cousins for my kids. So that's continued to be really difficult for me, trying to remain close emotionally and connected when we're
Hmm.
not very close geographically. And I
Right.
still to this day struggle with that. The flip side is because I have moved out of that kind of nucleus of family, our view of the world has broadened
Hmm.
significantly. We have been so fortunate to be a part of other states, other cultures, the Army culture in and of itself. And
Hmm.
while we miss our families, our friend groups have grown exponentially, and we have had so many just travel adventures. And really, I'm part of me feels like, oh man, I feel like my kids are growing up without that nuclear family of extended family all around. But I'm also glad they're growing up with
Like a
just the
different,
perspective. Yeah,
yeah,
this perspective of what the real world is like out of that bubble. So
right.
it's kind of interconnected for me,
Yeah,
the good
no, they
and
are
bad.
very interconnected. It's interesting because, like, when my husband and I got married, I was I think I turned 30 that year, and so it was, very hard to want to be a part of this thing because I had my life and I had my routine and I had,
Right.
this whole other version. So, the lived near family, like all those same things.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have kids at the time, so it's interesting to think about adding kids to that mix and then sort of taking them out of that too, because you're adjusting and they're adjusting. Um,
Right.
so that's interesting.
Yeah, and we've seen, when they were really little, I think they were like maybe 4, 6, and 8 at the time when we got in, and it felt like such a long ride. And I'm noticing now as we prepare for another PCS, like they are much more invested personally in their friendships and their communities that they've built. It's getting harder and harder to pull
Ugh,
them away from those
it
things.
does. Yeah, no, it definitely. I keep thinking it'll get easier, and I think there is like this perception, right? That oh, you've done it a lot of times, so sort of like deployments, right? This
Right.
idea that if you've deployed lots of times, they're easier, or that if you've PCS lots of times, it's easier. But it's very much the opposite. I think most people find that deployments are not easier because your life continues to change. So each one is its own set of challenges. And the same for PCSs. You've made different routes in each
Right.
places, and you're having to start over again. And so it is it is interesting to see how our kids in some ways have those same they very much have those same
Right.
challenges.
They do, but we're realizing that they do have the challenges, but they don't have the benefit of age that we
Right.
have, and
Right.
wisdom and hindsight and like emotional intelligence. So it's still
It's
very much a
hard.
learning in progress
Yes.
for all of us. A lot
Indeed,
of
indeed.
grace.
Yes, lots of grace. So tell me a little bit about I actually don't know the story, so I'm interested to hear this. Like how you and Kellie kind of got started, how MilSpo Guru came to be a thing. So talk a little bit about that evolution.
Okay, well, I don't want to go like too far into my life story, but I
No,
will
no.
give you a little bit of background just to kind of answer multiple questions
Sure.
that you presented. I am a trained teacher by profession, and before we got into the military, I had definitely taken a more part-time role with that. I was teaching private or public and private college classes just as I wasn't pregnant or having babies, and as it would work out. And so I really feel like that laid the groundwork for me to be very open to seeing what a flexible career could look like.
Mm-hmm.
And fast forward a few years, we got into the Army. As we've moved around, I have continued to do some part time teaching. Actually, did a full time teaching job last year. But um, I feel like I have always had a heart to educate others, whether that's students in a traditional classroom or really just anybody who will listen or anybody who wants to learn something based on my own expertise. And probably 3 or 4 years ago now, I connected with Kellie online. I had done some writing for her, for Millie,
Oh,
and
okay.
we got connected as Facebook friends. And I had posted something about the Enneagram online. And she immediately responded, and we kind of just went on this like really like
Yeah.
intense deep dive with each other and
Geek out
publicly
on
on a
Enneagram.
Facebook post and then through some emails. And I remember, I guess it would have been maybe fall of 2017, I messaged her and I was like, you know what, I'm really feeling like there is such a connection between all the stuff we're reading about the Enneagram and these shared struggles that so many
Mm-hmm.
military spouses have, and the things that these patterns we keep coming back to. And so we really like fleshed that out quite a bit. And then I think maybe by the next spring, maybe by like February of 2018, we were like, let's do something with this. And so that's when MilSpo Gurus was formed. We got a website, we got social media handles, and from there we have just kind of grown really like our area of expertise and our own training and study with the Enneagram,
Mm-hmm.
but also with like what we're offering and putting out there.
So back up for just a second because I should have asked this first. And if there is anyone who doesn't know about Enneagram, give me like the quick and dirty on
Elevator
like what
pitch.
yeah what is it, why would anyone care, like what's the value of it from
Right.
your perspective?
So a lot of people are really familiar with other typologies, maybe like Strength Finder or the Myers-Briggs.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhat similar in that it is a typology that you kind of type yourself, but where those just kind of maybe point to certain behaviors you have, the Enneagram as an ancient typology, it really starts looking at the root of why you're doing what you're doing and
Mm-hmm.
what your motivations are. And we have found that when you can really dig deeper and figure out those motivations, you're much more likely to behavior change and kind of rising to the good parts of your personality and
Right.
being led by those rather than things that hinder you, and maybe have hindered you for a long time in your personality.
Yeah, one of the things I really loved, when I had done it, it was a couple of years ago, maybe like 18 months, almost 2 years ago, but I'd paid like the $12 or whatever and done the more
Right.
extensive version. I had done
Mm-hmm.
like a free one, and that one was fine. And then I was like, well, this is interesting enough that I'd like to know a little bit more. So I
Right.
did the paid one. And I read those, I don't know, 15 pages or whatever it was, ridiculous report that comes from that with my jaw on the floor because it
Right.
was like I could not have summarized myself better than that text. And I found that part. I mean, I sent it to like every member of my family. I'm like, everybody needs to do
Right.
this, and then you need to send me your report so I know how to
Right.
how to
Well,
interact.
I'm curious. What's your number? What's your Enneagram
So
number?
I am four. Four is my top. Six
Okay.
is like right on its heels, and then I think five. I think was my third highest. I think that's right.
Okay.
And I've taken it
Okay.
twice because I did it
Well,
again with Kellie like a year later, um,
yes.
and it actually was the same. So it was still a four. I think the
That's good.
numbers changed slightly, but it was still, I
That was so
was,
your highest.
yeah, still my highest.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that was the same test I took, and it's actually the only one that Kelly and I recommend. So many people want to treat this like, oh, it's culturally cool right now to know your number, and they just want to do like a free test. And sometimes those really short free ones aren't gathering enough information. So we love the same paid one you're talking about. And I too remember taking it, and your jaw dropped. I cried. I just sat and cried because I literally felt like someone had been following me around my
right.
whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just this huge epiphany of like, well, no wonder, like,
Yeah,
no wonder I'm this way.
totally.
Yeah.
I remember
So
handing it to
we,
I remember I took it and handed it to my husband. I'm like, you need to read this. And he's like, yeah, like this is not news to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, this is news to me. How is this not news to you?
right.
And then I made him do it because there, if I remember correctly, there was a cool thing in there where you could put in, or something where you could, put in like your type
Match or
and their
type.
type and really understand then how does conflict look? What does conflict look
Hmm.
like? What does happy look like? Like, it went into all this detail about how each of your strengths and your struggles really start to inform how you're interacting in a way some of those things I hadn't really thought about before. I was like, oh, that makes total
Right.
sense. That's why we do that, because I'm here and he's there. Like, duh. But
Yeah.
it was just, I loved every bit of it. And so I remember when I found you guys forever ago, I feel like I found you in the very beginning.
Yeah.
I was like, "Ooh, they're doing this thing, this new thing that I love." So, talk a little bit about, like you mentioned, you guys kind of, all right, we're gonna like jump into the deep end, right? We're gonna do this, and you put out like a workbook, or as I recall, and then kind of like what can people find and what can people do, if they're trying to be interested in this, in understanding themselves better through this. What are some of the resources you guys have right now?
Right. Well, first of all, I want to just explain our brand and our title
Yeah,
just a
please.
little bit. So, as MilSpo Gurus, we felt like that was the true part of that is the MilSpo part, right? We're definitely military spouses, but the guru was really like a little tongue in cheek. We do not consider ourselves experts, but rather we feel like we want to kind of maybe be leading the way and like bringing others alongside with us as we continue to learn. As I mentioned earlier, we're not huge fans of like, oh, just go take a test. If you want to just find out your number, you can do that. But
Mm-hmm.
we felt like we were at the heart of wanting to like have a group and a community of people who wanted to really dig in
Mm-hmm.
and really spend time, not just saying, okay, here's my number, but okay, here's my number, and how is this impacting
Right. What
me,
does this
good
mean?
and bad, and how can I overcome some of those negative coping mechanisms in my life and those negative patterns that I'm falling into. And we want that to be accessible and a broad reach for anybody, but specifically, we have looked at how this is impacting, or how our knowing our Enneagram type can help impact us positively as military
Mm-hmm.
spouses. We first started out by putting out a course. And in that course, we walk through 5 modules of kind of like, I'm sorry, 4 modules. But in the first one, we talk about these 5 common stress points that we find all military spouses are repetitively coming back to. And
Mm-hmm.
it's things like the relational strains and stresses that we hit every time we move and have to make new friends. It's the physical, literally the physical demands
Mm-hmm.
of relocating and starting over, professionally, like how that looks. And so we started with the course, and since then we have added workbooks, we have added a couple of other downloads, and then I guess not quite a year ago, we started our podcast, the Advice Not Given podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really
Which is
a
so
labor of
fun.
love, but also it's just such a lighthearted thing and
Mm-hmm.
we call it our free therapy. Honestly, we were having these really deep conversations, and it's kind of interesting because Kelly and I don't really know each other personally, like as an in
In
person
person,
friendship.
right?
We've met one time in person,
It's
and all
crazy.
of our whole history is over Skype and
Right.
FaceTime and phone calls. And so we noticed that we were having these really deep conversations. And because there was this lack of familiarity, we both felt this freedom to just speak.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kelly, you ought to do, that's a tough problem. You ought to do this. And she'd tell me the same thing. And there was no offense taken because
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't my sister or my best friend. It was just this wise outside voice. And so we thought, you know what, we need to just start recording these conversations because we guarantee other people are dealing with
Right.
the same heavy issues. So
Yeah. No, it's super fun. So if y'all haven't checked that out, I'll make sure I don't know if I can, I think I can link to that. I'll have to figure out
yeah,
how to, yeah. I'll put that somewhere so folks can find you guys, because it's a
thank you.
great. I used to, when the weather was nice and when I was out walking, I used to to do, my download, and then I listened to it on my walk, and it's just a fun way to spend that time. So
Thank you.
maybe that's why I feel like I know you.
Absolutely.
So for folks who, I think you were talking a little bit about the MilSpo focus, if you will, of that. So I think, I was just curious your perspective, having done this for a while, and have probably talked to a lot of people about it. But I always wonder if there's sort of a fear that people have to know. Is it like, oh, once I know this, okay, now I have to do something with this? Like, do you find there's resistance to people really digging into those things, or do you find Enneagram to be unique in the way it approaches those typing in a way that brings people in differently?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's definitely not for everybody. And then you will have a group that would maybe only want to know their number. Kind of, we call that like the cocktail party level of information. Like, you just need to know enough to be conversational. But I do think there is a very large contingent of people who they're finding that all the old patterns and all the old behaviors are not working. Every time they're moving, or every time they're, coming up against a type of resistance in their life, they're not seeing any positive change. And I think there's a really big group of people that would love to see lasting change.
Mm-hmm.
And to us at MilSpo Gurus, the only way you do that is through understanding who you are and why you do what you do. And then with that knowledge, you're able to move forward and not respond so negatively or in the lower unhealthy levels of your number, but you're able to thrive and flourish and live a happier, more productive life.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things I remember really being floored by, is the ability to the way the report came back, and it talking about, this is who you are, if you will. But under stress, this is who you become. And it was like, oh yeah, no, I recognize her, and at your best, this is what it looks like. And that was, for me, I've never seen anything like that really gives you the ability to identify, oh, okay, well, if I am reacting in that way, there's clearly stress. Whether I have identified that stress or
Right.
not, there clearly is, because this is where I'm going. And so just being aware and just being able to see it, so you can get in front of it and kind of bring yourself back to
Absolutely.
center, back to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
Was that was one of the things that I remember also just finding very fascinating, that there's a pattern to that.
Right.
It's not random, right? There that
Right.
I do follow a pattern. And what I have found, and I haven't done near the like study you and Kelly do, but is that a lot of that really does prove true. Like, that really is how I tend to respond based on, me being a 4. Um,
Right.
so now I
Well, and we see when we're moving to maybe our stress levels, okay, well, what are some things that are in my control that I can take back control of and move back to that healthier place where I see myself kind of spiraling in this way, instead of just being like, oh, I'm in a funk, or oh, I'm feeling this way. You can say, oh no, this must be how I'm responding to this stress. What are these stressors? Which ones of these can I improve upon or remove? And then kind of get back to this more level spot or more healthy spot. And I have also found, and my husband Ryan and he of course made him take it right away. We've seen tremendous help, both being able to, I say it's like having a new
mm-hmm,
vocabulary or a more efficient way of communicating.
mm-hmm.
He's a 1, I'm a 6. Like you mentioned on the Ready website where you can kind of pair up your numbers, we have been able to come really far in our marriage and our communication, just simply because I know, oh, well, this is just his 1 showing, or this
Mm-hmm.
is just my 6 showing. And it's been really helpful and a way to offer each other a lot of grace and kindness.
Yeah, it just changes how you frame those things, I think.
Yeah,
You aren't jumping to an assumption or whatever, because you have a different framework for where those behaviors are coming from.
right.
Yeah. No, I'm obviously like, I'm a huge fan.
Yes, well, I'm glad. I'm glad.
But so the other thing I was curious about, you were talking about how you guys kind of, jumped in with 2 feet in this endeavor. And one of the things I've heard among multiple spotlights is this idea of people really just taking this thing that they either are good at or they enjoy, and is kind of this just become this passion or this discovered passion, and building it into something that is a service to others. So I'm curious from your perspective, like for someone who has that, um, what are some of the things that you have learned along the way that you like, wow, if I could go back and tell, my 2017 Claire as she's starting this venture, what are some of the lessons for someone else who's also considering that jump?
Well, there's probably a lot more than I can list here on a short conversation, but I know for Kellie and I, we kind of initially said this, and then it's something we keep coming back to. We decided early on that whether this was a money-making venture or not, we felt passionately enough about it as a hobby or as a passion project
Mm-hmm.
that we were all in no matter what. And so we actually did a podcast episode early on called Paychecks, and we were talking about how so many military spouses, we do so many things as volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and we do it out of the goodness of our hearts. And
Mm-hmm.
while that's not a bad thing, like you do at some point want to feel like your time is being validated
Mm-hmm.
and that you are getting something back in return for it. And for us, we just decided that whether this became financially lucrative or not, that we loved it enough
Right.
that the payoff we get from the people we interact with and the community we're building, that's also something not to overlook.
Right.
So I would say your passion in doing something is going to be the thing that keeps you coming back to it when you aren't feeling motivated, or maybe the dollar bills aren't coming in as quickly as you maybe had hoped that they would be. It's that passion that keeps it going. And then in the same vein, like we also feel like we don't really have to answer to anybody other than ourselves.
Right.
Like we kind of know what we want to do
Right.
and we do it, and
People
that's
like it, they like it, like, yeah. No, there's
take
a
it
lot
or
of
leave
freedom
it.
in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there is. So it's been really good, and we've enjoyed it too. Thankfully, we've neither PCS during this time, but it does feel like something that I'm supposed to move this summer. It's very portable. We do
Yeah.
everything digitally,
Right.
electronically through emailing and Skyping, and our podcast is recorded through Zencaster. So I'm really grateful that we've been able to build something that's PCS proof.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine if you and Kellie ever ended up in the same place?
I know. That would be crazy.
I know it would be crazy. Well, so I want to make sure everybody knows where to find you, so we can talk about that. But is there anything else about MilSpo Guru that you wanted to share that we didn't already talk about?
No, not that I can think of. I mean, just please come visit us at our website at milspogurus.com. We have an Instagram. That's kind of where we keep most of our content, is on Instagram more so than Facebook. And we would love for you to listen to our podcast, available anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. It's called Advice Not Given.
Awesome. Yay. Well, I'm so glad you had some time to join us today.
Thank you
for inviting me. It's great to finally meet you. So now I can pretend I've met Claire.
Yeah, high five through the Skype camera.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, guys, that's it for our chat with Claire. Hope you enjoyed that. And if you are interested in Enneagram, definitely check out MilSpo Guru and check out, I'll try to put a link to the test we were talking about as well, or something in there so you guys can see that. So take some time. Maybe that's a good activity for you to do this weekend and get to know yourself a little better. I definitely am a huge fan and would recommend it to anyone because I definitely learned a few things. So hope you guys have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next Spotlight.